Who are some of the best mid-round prospects that the Ravens could select in the 2022 draft? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode is sponsored by Blue Nile. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. Use code Locked On at checkout. We return here. It is a midweek edition of Locked On Ravens. And back with us here is our usual Tuesday guest. We'll call it a Taco Wednesday here today. It's okay. It's Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, it's been a little while, but I'm excited to get back with you talking Ravens football. How are you doing today?
Doing quite well. We are about 9 days from the draft at this point, so it's right around the corner. The itch is there. We're excited. This is my favorite time of the year and can't wait to get into it. So without further ado, man, let's get after it.
Yeah, let's do it. And I know before we get into the draft content, we'll talk about those mid-round prospects in the second segment and some mailbag questions in the final one. I first want to talk about a couple of things that happened on the personnel front for this Ravens team, Spencer. We'll start off with Miles Boykin because there was news coming out yesterday, obviously 2 days ago. The Ravens cut Boykin. They released him, saving around $2.5 million in cap space. But yesterday, it was reported that Boykin was claimed by an AFC North rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Spencer, it seems like Boykin was a cut candidate for a while. It seemed like he was one of the players that you could let go of if you're Baltimore, save a decent amount, all things considered. It's not the biggest amount of money, but it's something. How do you feel about that release coming now instead of maybe at the end of training camp, and also him going to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Boykin never turned into that all-time great athlete that he tested like at the Combine. Did have some nice contested catches at Notre Dame. Had a couple nice moments throughout, but a lot of disappointment. Really felt like the frustration mounted when the Ravens in 2020 really relied on him to be an X-receiver and be a go-to big body on the outside. And in that Eagles win, that late Carson Wentz comeback in 2020, Boykin started run blocking on a one-on-one fade in the end zone to him, and Lamar Jackson lobbed up a ball for a receiver that was at the line of scrimmage blocking still. After that, it was kind of really the first time I've seen this Ravens team really blame a player. Like Lamar Jackson made some allusions. David Culley at the time made some allusions to, not understanding the playbook or understanding where to be or what was happening. And Boykin took responsibility himself. So it seems like this offense never set into his brain. You don't want to knock the guy's work ethic without knowing or anything. He showed up. He had a ton of effort when he was, in special teams or in run blocking situations, but just seemed to never really click within this offense, unfortunately. In Pittsburgh, signed now, feels like he can be a nice vertical threat still. I was thinking that the Packers would be really interested in acquiring him as someone that I think has the potential to be a cheap, maybe replacement for Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but Pittsburgh got to him before the Packers did. So curious to see how he pans out there. They've done a great job developing receivers over the years, and he certainly has some really strong tools and is such a dynamic special teams player and blocker in those kind of lesser valued roles of a wide receiver. So, the potential's there. Never really set in with the Ravens offense, but I don't think anyone would be shocked to see him become a productive player. But it's tough to say at this point. So we'll see if a change of scenery kicks his career into gear.
Yeah, and Boykin reuniting with Chase Claypool over there in Pittsburgh, two Notre Dame receivers, so it'll be interesting to see how those guys play off of each other. And I feel like, yeah, the Ravens will be playing them twice a year. Obviously, some fans are concerned about, is he going to give the playbook away? It's not an issue with guys going to different teams. It happens every single season, and every fan base kind of looks at it and says, is this player going to give the playbook away? No, it's not going to be a big deal there. But Spencer, a couple other things that happened that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet are the re-signings of both Josh Bynes and Calais Campbell. And it seems like, obviously, after the Bobby Wagner situation played out and he did not end up joining Baltimore, the Ravens had to pivot. And it felt like Bynes was it really felt like he was an option for them at that point. And even before he had expressed interest in coming back to Baltimore during the exit interview portion of the offseason, the beginning portion there. And now he's back in Baltimore for his fourth stint, and Campbell back for his second. Obviously, Campbell saying that he wants to compete. I think the Ravens give him a very, very good chance to do that. How do you feel about those two coming back to Baltimore?
Yeah, it was a little, felt like it was a time where the Ravens could have not re-signed Calais Campbell and kind of swallowed the difficulty they would have without him and try and move into a new era and avoid maybe kind of the stopgap type. But at the same time, they really lack leadership defensively. They've lacked some accountability defensively. A new coach, the result of that, a couple faces gone now from Baltimore over the years. It's been a really big turnover defensively over the last 3-4 years. So Campbell is still a great run defender, is still a long, capable pass rusher that can execute stunts. Older player, but has been a leader, has been a good player, arguably the best defender for Baltimore over the last couple of years. So it's tough. It feels like it was a little bit of a catch-22 or a lose-lose. It's time to move in a new direction, but you're going to have to sacrifice being able to have a consistent defensive front. So he is a big piece for sure. The value, you're probably going to get good value relative to his contract, but it just kind of felt like it was time to revamp and bite the bullet and finally flip the switch on the defensive line, and they elected not to. So it's kind of more of the same of what we've seen over the last couple of years. The Ravens continuing to go with, the veteran defensive cheaper options and stopgap players. I don't think that Campbell's necessarily a stopgap, but he's not a stopgap. It's a weird gray area, I'd say. So they kind of punted there, bring him back, and you love the dude. You love the ability against the run and the leadership, the accountability, the human, and all of that stuff. So they could have done a lot worse. And then Josh Bynes, cheap, what you're getting, is a capable player, loves Baltimore, loves playing here as executed by his fourth stint in Baltimore. So again, you just know what you're getting. You're going to have a nice veteran presence that can do some things for you against the run and make a play here or there, give some accountability and again, some veteran leadership. So not a real needle mover necessarily, but played well last year, played well the year before that, and probably going to find his way into the football field again unless there's a major move made at linebacker.
Yeah, and something I actually just thought about here that I wanted to ask you about, Spencer, is the reports that came out, I think it was, a couple weekends ago, about Melvin Gordon potentially working on a contract with this team. I know there were very mixed results about whether people wanted Melvin Gordon in Baltimore versus not. Obviously, with the uncertainty surrounding J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, it would be nice to have a veteran option in the backfield. But as we'll get into in the second segment, there are a lot of quality options in the middle rounds here at the running back position in the 2022 draft. And Gordon probably will not come will not come as cheap as a running back on a rookie contract. You're going to have to pay him a couple $1 million a season, it seems like. Would you be on board with a Gordon signing if you're the Ravens?
No, I don't think I would. I think it was a lot of smoke as well. It seemed pretty atypical for something like that to get leaked by the Ravens. Seemed like it might have been a little bit of trying to drive a price up elsewhere. But, I do understand the conversation of a running back with needing to have a third body, both those guys coming off of injury. I think the likelihood that both Dobbins and Edwards play a combined 34 regular season games is probably very low. So you do need that third back. But, again, they have a ton of picks on, late day 2, early day 3. And there's some capable running backs that, Brian Robinson or Zamir White, guys that can kind of play on third down and give you someone that could take a little bit of a bell cow role if needed. But I think it's time for a youth movement. Need to make sure you have someone that's explosive enough beyond what they had maybe in Freeman and Murray to provide a break class in case of emergency with Dobbins and Edwards. But I think paying for a running back at this point would just be a little bit too rich for me. And I don't think they were going to in the first place, to be honest.
Right. And Gordon probably wouldn't take the deal that I think you and I would want him to take, Spencer, in terms of a veteran option. It feels like, again, the explosiveness that some of these running backs have in the mid rounds, I feel like I would rather take a chance on that as opposed to Gordon, who's a very good player. But I just feel like with the money situation, the Ravens still having to clear up a bit of cap. It feels like Gordon probably isn't the best fit right now, but again, would still be a quality player in this offense. Just a matter of, does he fit with the salary cap and everything and just the positional value right now. But also, Spencer, the Ravens returning for voluntary workouts, and Tyus Bowser walking into that facility looking very confident on that Achilles. Did that make you excited at all?
Certainly. I was honestly, as a fan, very upset when Bowser sustained that injury. It's been a long road for him to become such a productive player. and felt like fought through kind of getting lost in the shuffle a few times or not taking the torch when it was handed to him. And to finally do that, especially late on an injury-plagued team and become so successful, be a bright spot on a turd sandwich, so to speak, ultimately ended up finding a way to do all of those things and then ends up getting an injury in week 18 in the 17th game for the first time. Late in that game too was just devastating. And of course it had to be an Achilles. So hopefully he's able to recover. He is an absolute freak athlete. I think one of only 5 linebackers at the combine since 2000 to be 6'3", at least 245, at least jump at least 35 inches, have an under 6'9" 3-cone. And the other guys are like DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, TJ Watt, and actually Malik Harrison. So crazy athlete. Doesn't shock you to see him come back quickly. And, those Achilles injuries are starting to look a little bit more like ACLs, where years ago they were devastating and more recently they have been. But read a good bit after the Cam Akers injury. There's a new procedure that makes sure that other areas of the Achilles that are not injured don't become injured, trying to overcompensate to prop up that recovering area. So hopefully that new process allows him to ultimately find the field again in 2022 because they need him. And generally it was just really sad to see. So happy for Bowser. Hopefully he's able to come back and be that positive light yet again for Baltimore.
Yeah, for such a bad injury season, it just puts such a bad end to that injury-filled season. Just you think the Ravens are in the clear, and it's like, all right, well, they're not making the playoffs, but they won't have any more injuries. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh wow, they had another injury, and it might cost Bowser some games here in 2022. It feels like. So to see him walk, it's a very nice step. It was good to see him do that, and we'll see how the recovery ends up taking him. But again, hopefully, it is a very speedy one for him. We'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be diving into some of those mid-round prospects the Ravens could select in 2022. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, I want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And we are introducing Blue Nile, the original online jeweler. And there is a lot to look forward to here at BlueNile.com. You can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic timeless jewelry piece, all at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. And so here, this Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packages that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever place. Go to BlueNile.com today. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, getting into the draft now. Very, very close. It creeps up every single day. And the Ravens, they have the 14th overall pick, but also they have 10 total picks, 9 in the first 4 rounds. And it feels like they could do some maneuvering up and down the draft board depending on what happens. But there are a lot of players, a very deep draft class here, that when you start getting into the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds, you have some very quality options, even looking forward to the 6th and 7th as well. But Spencer, I wanted to talk to you about some of your guys who you feel like could be very good options in those middle rounds for the Ravens. Obviously, 5 4th-round picks for this team right now. If they keep all those picks, they have to hit on a lot of them, it feels like, if they want to have a decently competitive roster, not just for this year, but also for the future. And I mean, with all these guys, already talented players on this roster, to add to that with 5 4th-round picks, it would be astronomical if they were able to hit on, let's say, 3 or 4 of those guys. So Spencer, who are some of those day 2/day 3 prospects who are your guys and you would feel would fit on this team?
Yeah, I think an interesting one is very similar to Patrick McCary, to be honest, but he has experience at center in college. It's Zach Tom, tested like an elite athlete, ran under a 5. 7.32 3-cone, 4.47 shuttle, 33-inch vertical, 9.10 on the broad jump, all elite, tested like an absolute elite athlete, about 6'4", 305, 33.25-inch arm, 6'8", over a 6'8" wingspan, had 14 career starts as a center, 23 as a left tackle, has that kind of versatility, came from Wake Forest, who uses a lot of RPO, zone run scheme, so a lot of play action, a lot of RPO, and super quick player. Gave Jermaine Johnson the clamps this past year as a left tackle. Think he is a very, very fluid, quick, strong footwork oriented player. Doesn't have overpowering kind of drive ability, but when you kick him into center, he is bigger. He is a little stronger than, for instance, maybe a Tyler Linderbaum or some of these other players that are smaller, less, long, and not quite of that capability to go play a left tackle. So I think he's somewhat similar ultimately to McCary, but has true experience as an actual center as well as a tackle. So that versatility, I think, is really valuable. Another one who isn't necessarily unknown at all, but a middle round kind of guy, Jamari Saylor out of Georgia, also played left tackle, played left guard, played right tackle, played all four other than center for the Bulldogs. And at that point, you're not shocked to see him be able to play some center. He is not an elite athlete. He's about 6'3", 320, so bigger boy, 33 and 5/8 inch arms, 6'8" wingspan as well. Definitely a little bit of stiffness to his game, but all he does is win. Very, very, very dominant performances at time against Michigan, against Alabama, doing it against some of the best rushers in the country, and has independent hand usage, had a really nice Senior Bowl, plays with good pad level. I think he anchors really well, just wins a lot of reps over and over and over again. But again, I think elite athletes will give him some trouble ultimately. A little bit more of a hip bender, a waist bender than a knee bender. He's not the most fluid player, but all SEC player, started all over their line. He was a 5-star prospect and really was pivotal in Georgia's offensive line. He's built like a fridge, and I think he's going to be a very high-level backup worst case that can go plug and play in a lot of different areas. Just natural. He wins. He gets it. It's not a hard evaluation. You look at some of the athletic limitations maybe, but then ultimately you end up looking at him as like, all right, this guy can play anywhere. He did it at a high level. He's a good run blocker. He wins in the pass game. He knows his limitations. Very smart. And another guy who wins a lot and is kind of a lesser talked about tackle option that will definitely be outside of the first round is Rasheed Walker, coming out of Penn State. 6'5 and a half, 313, 33 and 5/8 inch arms, 6'8 wingspan, wins a lot. Again, goes against some really high-level rushers in the Big Ten, puts up some awesome performances. Stout, thick dude, athletic. He has power in the run game. He can really drive block and work guys out of a gap. Explosive to get to his vertical set against, wide rushers. I think he has heavy hands. Just doesn't really have independent hands yet, and that's something that, you would hope was developed at this point. You see him kind of using a two-hand strike at times, and really leaves you vulnerable when you miss with both hands to not have another one. It leads to quick losses, essentially. So I think there are some work points in terms of where his set point is in different types of sets, and make sure he's not over and undersetting. But I think he has a strong feel for it when they get into the rhythm of the game. Again, really impressive against Michigan. Shut down David Ajabo quite a bit. Was a 4-star recruit. He's just 22 in February. 3-year starter, tons of starts there. And it's a power-based run game at Penn State, so he's got familiarity there for the Ravens. Definitely someone that would fit into their offense ultimately. I think he's a good fit and someone that I think would be comfortable if they wanted to go that route for, feeling good about Ronnie Stanley, but wanting a little bit of insurance. Another player along the front, Cam Jurgens, the center from Nebraska. Tyler Linderbaum gets a lot of hype. Cam Jurgens' wingspan is 6 inches longer than his. Very similar player, tested like an elite athlete, can run downfield, give you those highlight reel blocks 30 yards downfield on DBs. Kind of plays a little too caffeinated. There are some, you would like to see some more pace in the run game at times, but runs like a deer. Very forceful player. I think he can deal better than Linderbaum with some of the bigger one-techs and nose tackles. Just a little bit bigger, longer, stronger, but not nearly as consistent. Plays like a real junkyard dog. He still will struggle with some degree of NFL level nose tackles, but ultimately really elite athlete. And if you don't need to start him immediately, let him settle in a little bit. I think he's a really nice option. He's a 3-year starter. Nebraska, again, runs a lot of play action, a lot of option stuff, and was originally a tight end when Jurgens came, but he's explosive. I really think he's underrated in this class, and I don't think the gap between him and Tyler Linderbaum is as big as a lot of people are aware of. So I definitely encourage people to watch there. Did have some missed snaps in 2020. He had like 2 bad snaps, and Nebraska's whole fan base jumps on him. I know Ravens fans know about that, but I think a lot of Ravens fans would be surprised to see that bad snaps do happen at times, regardless of who you are. So Jurgens, another extremely intriguing one. D'Angelo Malone, the edge rusher out of Western Kentucky, 6'8 wingspan, 6'3", 240, 41-inch vertical. Has a lot of juice, a ton of juice coming around the outside. Not necessarily, a power player, but He definitely can go speed rush for you. He is their all-time sack leader. He was the CUSA Defensive Player of the Year, first team all-conference, and had a nice performance at the Senior Bowl. Definitely very explosive, but will need to come off the field on first and second down, especially immediately at the NFL level. One of my favorite corners in this draft is Cam Taylor-Britt, also a Nebraska guy. A little bit undersized for the Ravens' liking, but he has plenty of wingspan. It's about 5'11", 196, 31.5-inch arm, 6'3" wingspan, ran a 4.38. Super physical player. Reminds you of Marlon Humphrey coming downhill against screens. Wants to crush blocks. Wants to, if you're lazy on a screen against him, he's going to embarrass you. Extremely disruptive. Does have recovery speed. Really good straight line speed. Can be a savior working all the way across the field to run down a play on the other side of the field. A little over aggressive as a tackler, but wants to go blow guys up. So you see some of that. I wouldn't say he's the most fluid corner, and that's probably why he's not going to be a day one or early day two guy. But the physicality, the ability against the run, he's a bull in a china shop, and definitely is really able to be versatile in press coverage, being physical in man coverage, matches releases and mirrors well, but he is a little stiff to turn and run at times. So I don't know that you're going to get a really high level corner, but playing behind a Marcus Peters and a Marlon Humphrey, learning from them, learning the nuance, I think is definitely going to be an early role player and someone that could be a potential long-term starter. Cole Strange along the offensive line had a great Senior Bowl, just to rattle off another couple of names. Alex Wright, I think out of UAB, is a really appreciated edge rusher, 6'11" wingspan, and really powerful. Also has the ability to kind of bend and dip a little bit despite being super tall. He's kind of a traits prospect that you'd like to see get it all together. Kind of reminds you of like a poor man's Alden Smith in ways. One of the guys that I would be willing to take a flyer on late in the draft, who does have some injury concern, Damone Clark out of LSU, was actually someone who was fighting to be maybe my like linebacker one in this class. Really, really love his complete game at LSU. Ends up having a really bad neck injury, so he's ended up having a spinal fusion, and he's probably going to miss his rookie year. But I think he has all of the tools, all of the physicality to be a top tier kind of first down linebacker, and I think he can play against the pass. Would be able to stay on the field on third down. He can be a little bit too aggressive in his approach, but I think he had a ton of potential. Would love to take a late round flyer on a guy like that. JT Woods out of Baylor, a very rangy safety that could be added to a room. Jack Sanborn, Leo Chenal gets a ton of run in the media, but Sanborn's a hell of a player himself, got size, a little bit stubby, but decent, athlete, decent, smart player. Running through a couple others here. Tyquan Thornton, a late round wide receiver that I think can absolutely fly. And the final one I'll talk about is Josh Paschal coming out of Kentucky. A little bit short, but it's got plenty of arm length, plenty of wingspan, 6'2", 270, 6'7" wingspan. Had really great explosives, 37.5-inch vertical, 10'3" on the broad jump. One of the most dominant run defenders in this class. Super disruptive, can kick inside to play 3-tech. Absolutely ran train on Florida. Had some really dominant moments against some really good SEC teams as well. He's not a terrible pass rusher right now, but he definitely is more effective as a run defender. Great on stunts and twists, being the kind of bully or trying to be the one who creates a mess for someone to loop inside or outside. Going to be a versatile player, but it's really going to be difficult to see him not turning out to be a guy who finds the field, especially on first and second down, and can kick inside. Kind of reminds you of John Franklin Myers on the New York Jets, who just got a pretty big contract. Just a very violent player that's got a lot of tools and tested well. Arguably the best run defender in this draft, I'd say, alongside Trayvon Walker as an edge defender ultimately, and up there with Jermaine Johnson as well. So there's a pretty long list for you of some guys that I like after day one and late at least on day two.
Yeah, some of the many. And those guys that Spencer mentioned, again, the Ravens don't have to necessarily reach for positions of need because this is such a deep draft class at those positions of needs where they can look to a guy in day two, like a corner, and maybe then get a edge guy in day three or vice versa, and then throw an offensive lineman in there, linebacker. There are all these different positions. So I like a lot of the guys that Spencer mentioned there. In fact, I liked all of them. Yeah. I liked all of them. So good insight there from Spencer. But we'll head into our final break. When we get back, we'll be diving into some of your mailbag questions. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And this is the time of year people give up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that this year. And if yours is to eat healthy, do it with Built Bar. And if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs, you really are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. So that means they're fluffy and marshmallowing, and they taste really good. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and all Built Bars, in fact, are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low-calorie, high-protein, very healthy for you. They contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They have a ton of great flavors as well. Mint brownie is my favorite, but you also have coconut, almond, etc. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Spencer Schultz, and thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft with former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker and Ryan Tracy. This draft is creeping up faster and faster. But now we're going to dive into some mailbag questions here on Locked On Ravens here on this Wednesday episode. And we're going to start off with a question from B. Ward. Spencer, I'll be posing these to you, and I'll have you answer them. I'll give my thoughts as well, kind of a tag team mailbag here from you and I. But B. Ward asks, of the rumored wide receiver contract disputes around the NFL, who may be traded? How do you rank these guys? A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel. I think EDC's belief is their fourth-round picks. That's blind optimism. They need to trade for quantity, for better quality. Just look at the past two drafts past round 4. So how would you rank those three, Spencer? A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and would you be in the market for any of those guys, assuming the price is right, considering the contracts they're probably going to get?
I'm in the market for all of those guys. I know that, A.J. Brown has had some injury complications a little bit. I would like to dig into further, just kind of speculatively. Do think he's a fantastic player. I have a personal affinity for Terry McLaurin. I love the type of worker he is. I love the development that he's shown. I remember that Urban Meyer, back when he was in high school, basically told him his technique to catch the football wasn't good enough. If your hands improve and you become a more refined pass catcher, like actually physically receiving the ball with proper technique, then, I'll give you a full scholarship. He said McLaurin came back a couple months later to another camp and was the best hands catcher at that camp, was the best gunner in the nation at Ohio State, turned into an absolutely complete receiver that can be a vertical threat, an underneath threat, force guys to miss, contested catch guy, play outside, can be moved around, and really, he can be relied on as a number one guy. I have a little bit of a personal affinity for him just as a person as well. Is he the most talented of the three? Maybe not, but I really like me some Terry. And then, Deebo, beast, man. Tough not to love Deebo. So I probably would go Deebo 1, Terry 2, AJ Brown 3. All three are fantastic, though.
Yeah, they are. You really can never go wrong. And look, Deebo Samuel won me a lot of fantasy leagues. I picked him in the middle, late-ish rounds of a lot of fantasy drafts, and he won me 2 or 3 of those leagues. If I had to rank them, Spencer, you said you had that affinity for McLaurin. I have it for Brown. He was my wide receiver 1 in that draft class, and that's no shade to anybody else in that draft class. There were a lot of wide receivers coming out of that draft that were amazing. But to me, I think for me, it's probably Brown, Deebo, Terry McLaurin. But again, if the Ravens were to get any of those guys, I'm not complaining about any of them because they're that talented of players. And yeah, I'm in on all of them as well. There's always the question of how much would the Ravens give up for a wide receiver now, considering what they have at the position. It's a lot different than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but it still feels like they would benefit, obviously, from having one of those talented players on their roster. And the next question here comes from Richie Bradshaw, who asks, would you rather trade into the top 10 for Kayvon Thibodeau or Sauce Gardner, provided the price is reasonable? And it seems like, yeah, Spencer, these guys are probably not making it to 14. Seems pretty likely that's not going to happen. So if you had your pick of one of them that you could trade into the top 10 for, who would you be choosing?
I personally prefer Thibodeau. I think that he has the juice, the get off, the will as an edge rusher. I think he gets a lot of flack for not having counters, but I also think he follows the KISS plan. Keep it simple, stud. He's going to go after you with get off. He's going to use that long arm. He's got explosive power. He's been extremely productive since he was 18 years old. He's got the pedigree. I think all of the mishigas about him as a worker or whatever he likes to do outside of football is honestly hilarious. I think he's a top 5 player. He's my number 1 edge rusher. And I think he's what the Ravens have been missing as a pass rush for a long time, really since Terrell Suggs was in his prime. So give me Thibodeau. I like Sauce Gardner for sure, but I see Thibodeau as someone that could really take the Ravens to the next level, and I think would fit into Mike McDonald's defense really well.
Yeah, I feel like using a word like transcendent is kind of like a strong word, especially for someone who hasn't hit the NFL level yet. But like Thibodeau has the potential to be one of these transcendent talents at the next level. And so look, so does Sauce Gardner. He's extremely, extremely talented. But also, when you look at the needs on this team right now, the Ravens, with Bowser's injury, Dalen Hayes missing most of his rookie season, Adafe Owe seems like he's fully healthy now, but coming off the foot injury, the shoulder surgery, what is that? The Ravens still have Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, and it's the same thing, right? Like they both are coming off season-ending injuries, but it feels like they have those two guys at the edge position. They just have a little bit less, and if you can add a player like Thibodeau to that, I feel like it ups the I feel like mantra of that room a ton. So I feel like also in the second round you can get a guy like Rajah McCreary or Kyler Gordon, who's also feels like getting first round buzz as well. There are those second round corners where I feel like, hey, if you can get Thibodeau and McCreary, depending on what you give up, it feels like the second would probably have to go in a trade up scenario anyway. Then I feel like you could probably work with a lot on that defense for sure. And the next question here, it comes from Shane Carty, who asks, which one of the running backs in this class do you see best fit the Ravens? I think round 4 is a real possibility to grab one for insurance while JK and Gusto recover. And which one has the best overall skill set do you see the Ravens possibly drafting? Rachaad White or Cook? So I feel like this is it encompasses everybody here, Spencer, not just White and Cook. But it's something like we were talking about earlier with Melvin Gordon in terms of, do you sign the veteran or do you draft the young guy? So which one of these running backs do you like in this draft that really has the best fit for this Baltimore offense?
Yeah, out of Rachaad White and Cook, it's a tough one. I think Cook brings a lot as a receiver. So does Rachaad. So I don't know. It's a little bit of a toss-up for me. I think I'm going to go with Cook, who's just done it at a higher level. I don't know that he brings enough physically to sustain in a workhorse role, but as a complementary back needed on third down, let's say, one of Dobbins or Edwards can't go at some point this year, I think that they're going to turn in a nice deal for you. But Rachaad White's also a hell of a football player. Had a really nice Senior Bowl. He get a little bit too patient at times in ways, but outside of those guys, I really like Brian Robinson. I really like Zamir White as guys that are later round options that are a little bit proven. I think that Brian Robinson, you know what you're getting on third down, and it's a dynamic pass protector that can come in day one and be confident in stepping into the A-gap and picking up a blitzer and processing well. Ty Chandler, another exciting one out of North Carolina. Zamir White would be perfect, but has had 2 ACLs already at this point. Runs like a Raven, is an absolute, brick wall running through the hole. Definitely can run away. He's a super tough runner. He has acceleration. He can cut a little bit. I don't know that he produces, consistently reading in like zone concepts yet, but give him a hole, he'll run someone over and, take it to the house. So I think pairing him with a finesse style running back would be really nice. And between him and Robinson, I think you're getting something that is proven, durable, with Robinson especially, and is ready to go immediately.
Yeah, there are a lot of those talented mid-round running backs. You can also look to maybe Jerome Ford out of Cincinnati or Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame or some players who I know a lot of people like and have different skill sets. It feels like the Breece Halls and the Isaiah Spillers and the Kenneth Walkers will probably go a bit too early for the Ravens. There's not that like Zeke Elliott, for example, that's going like number 4 overall, for example, in this class. It's probably second round where the first running back will probably go, maybe third. I feel like day 3 is where I would take a running back if I were the Ravens, and you have those options on the table if you're Baltimore in the mid to late rounds. But finally, our last question from Ofi Defoy asks, hey, Kevin, with the cut of Boykin, what is the best move? 1, wide receiver at the draft, 2 at the draft, 1 at the draft, and 1 free agent. Thanks for your job. It's a pleasure to look at your channel at lunchtime. Well, thank you for that comment at the bottom. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, Spencer, we're starting the show like we ended or ending the show like we started it with Miles Boykin. And it feels like with the wide receiver position, I mean, how would you address it? Would you draft 1? Would you draft 2? Would you go with a combination of 1 at the draft and 1 at free agency? It feels like to me, they only really need 1 more. I was kind of shocked when they kept 7 last year, and I feel like this could be the year they keep 6.
Definitely feels like this is the year they can keep 6. If I'm the Ravens, I'm going to draft 1. I'm going to try and look for one of those guys that maybe it's a George Pickens in round 2. Maybe it's a Alec Pierce or a Christian Watson or looking for another receiver that can kind of play that power forward in the Ravens kind of 5 receiver mix. That could be another outside body. I think, it's an interesting question to ask. A lot of the mock drafts are going to have the Ravens with a corner or an edge or a defensive player ultimately, especially over the first 2 rounds. But who could you add maybe at 14 or 45 that would take this offense over the top? You do need a tackle. If Ronnie Stanley can't go, this is a deep tackle class. There are some center options past round 1. So if they went and took a Jamison Williams, if they went and took a Treylon Burks or a Drake London or a George Pickens, Christian Watson, like I said, some of those guys, it would be really interesting. So I don't think you want to draft 2. Definitely think they do draft 1. There's some better options, or some more options obviously later. With the way that the last few classes of wide receivers have been so stacked, it feels like there's a surplus. The quantity is much higher than the demand almost with how the game has changed over the last couple of years. And I think, that Hollywood Brown 2019 class shows it. How many of those guys, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, all these receivers after round 1, when they were really highly regarded prospects. So it's very interesting to see. But another outside body to me is someone that could be a vertical threat. Also break some tackles after the catches is something the Ravens could really use, especially in the event that, hey, again, Bateman and Brown probably not going to play every single game this year. Players do get hurt, as we know from last year. So making sure that you have another outside body that can do some damage after the catch, I think would take this offense over the top.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's been funny, my kind of evolution into the Ravens drafting a wide receiver. At first, I was like, no, I don't want it. Like, no more drafting wide receivers, sign a veteran. Then I'm like, all right, yeah, maybe like a mid-round guy. Then I got on the George Pickens train. Now I'm like, if it's the 14th pick, it's the 14th pick. There are just so many options there. But I was so adamant for months on this channel how the Ravens were not going to take 2 wide receivers in 2021. And then Tylan Wallace was there in the 4th round, and the rest is history there. And I liked the pick, but it was like, okay, 2 wide receivers in each of the last 3 drafts. I'm pretty confident they're not going to take 2 wideouts again here in 2022. Anything is possible. I'm not saying it's not going to happen at all, but I feel like, I agree with you, Spencer. It'll probably be just draft a guy whether it is in the early rounds, mid rounds, late rounds, they have options. That's where I would go at that position. But Spencer, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me here on the show once again. And when we get back next week, we'll be just days away until the 2022 draft, and just exciting time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on again, Kevin. Draft coming up. Can't be more excited. And Ravens have a lot of ability to move up, down, left, and right in that draft. So should be a nice, fun class that we'll get to digest for a couple months into training camp.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And be sure to follow Spencer's work on Baltimore Beatdown, of course, and his Twitter at Ravens4Dummies. A lot to be in the description below. He does great work. Be sure to check it out, especially with the draft coming up. That's a big part of everything that Baltimore Beatdown does over there. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. We'll get back here tomorrow. We'll be diving in to more Ravens talk, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.